Look at any royal portrait of the 17th century, men draped in velvet and gold, women glowing in silk and pearls, faces pale, serene, almost divine. These were not just paintings, they were propaganda designed to project perfection. Royal blood was supposed to be sacred, chosen by God himself. These people had everything: power, wealth, the best physicians, the best education. But behind those canvases lies a terrible truth. What you're seeing is a mask, a dynasty so obsessed with preserving power that they destroyed themselves from within. Nowhere is that more tragic, more grotesque, than in the life of Charles II of Spain, the final king of the Spanish Habsburgs, a man born into a body that should never have survived. Charles's story begins on November 6, 1661, in the royal palace of Madrid. The chamber was dimly lit, heavy with incense. Midwives gathered, priests prayed, courtiers waited for the cry of a newborn heir. Spain, at that time, was still one of the most powerful empires on earth, its flag flown from the Philippines to the Americas. But on that day, as the queen screamed and the baby entered the world, the future of the empire was delivered broken. The infant's head was grotesquely large, his breathing shallow and strained. His skull bones had not fused properly, leaving it swollen and misshapen. His tiny mouth hung slack, unable to close. The midwives looked at one another in silence. And then, something history rarely records. His own mother recoiled. Queen Mariana of Austria, exhausted and pale from childbirth, reportedly refused to nurse her son. This was not coldness or maternal cruelty. It was instinctive horror. For the queen knew exactly what she was looking at, not just a frail baby, but the price of a dynasty's choices. Because Queen Mariana was not just Charles's mother, she was also his aunt and his cousin. His father, Philip IV of Spain, had married his own niece. The family tree of the Habsburgs was less a branching lineage and more a tightly wound circle, twisted upon itself. Trying to untangle it is an impossible puzzle of repeated names, recycled titles, cousins marrying cousins, uncles wedding nieces. And yet, this was no accident. The Habsburgs had long believed in a policy summed up by a saying, "Let others wage war. You, happy Austria, marry." They wielded marriage as a political weapon, forging alliances not by treaties but by blood. To them, purity of lineage was power itself. In practice, this meant centuries of intermarriage, cousins, uncles, nieces, sometimes even double first cousins, all bound in holy matrimony. They thought they were keeping power concentrated. What they were really doing was concentrating disease. Modern scientists now call it genetic suicide. Consider this number. Over 80% of Spanish Habsburg marriages were between close relatives, not distant kin met once at a family gathering. These were unions of people who often shared grandparents, or worse. By the time Charles was born, all 8 of his great-grandparents descended from the same royal couple, Philip of Fermors of Castile and Joanna of Castile, better known as Juana la Loca, Joanna the Mad. What emerged in Charles was the logical, horrifying conclusion. Modern DNA analysis has calculated his inbreeding coefficient at 0.254, meaning a quarter of his genes were identical copies inherited from the same ancestors. For comparison, the child of a brother and sister has a coefficient of 0.25. In other words, Charles II was more inbred than the product of direct sibling incest. But numbers don't capture the terror of that first night in Madrid. Imagine the silent cradle. A baby who could barely feed, whose mouth deformed from birth could not latch, whose cries came weak and infrequent. In an era without formula, this was a death sentence in waiting. Yet this infant, frail as a candle flame, was the heir to an empire. To the outside world, however, none of this could be admitted. Portraits would later show him in embroidered doublets, painted with flattering light, his deformities softened. But behind palace doors, physicians whispered in dread. The queen turned her face, and the court servants understood what the dynasty refused to see, that Spain's future lay in a body already breaking. This is the paradox of Charles II. Born in a palace of marble, surrounded by wealth and ceremony, yet trapped in a body shaped by centuries of arrogance. His cradle was gilded, but his blood carried a curse not of witches or demons, as people would later whisper, but of genealogy itself, a family tree so tangled it had become a noose tightening around the infant king. From the very beginning, Charles was not like other children. The first months of his life were a struggle for survival. His skull remained swollen, his bones soft, his lips unable to close. Feeding him was an ordeal. He could not suckle properly. And so wet nurses were hired, sometimes 3 or 4 at a time, to attempt to keep the prince alive. They reported disturbing details. The infant rarely cried, not because he was content, but because he seemed too weak to summon the energy. When he lay in his cradle, pale and motionless, his oversized head tilted to one side, the silence frightened even the hardened servants who tended him. The physicians of the court, men who considered themselves among the best in Europe, were baffled. They had seen children born with deformities before, but never in the royal household, never in the heir to the Spanish throne. They scribbled notes about his weak suck, his difficulty feeding, and his shallow, rasping breaths. But their remedies, amulets, prayers, herbal mixtures, could not alter what was written in his blood. The palace walls echoed with anxious prayers. Outside, Spain's subjects were told that their new prince was strong and healthy, chosen by God. Inside, the truth was carefully hidden. The survival of the dynasty required not only that Charles live, but that he appear worthy of the crown. Appearances in royal courts were everything. Yet the reality grew harder to disguise as he entered childhood. At age 4, Charles still could not walk. His legs, thin as reeds, bent from rickets, refused to support his weight. Servants carried him everywhere in specially designed chairs, lifting him like an infant, though he was already a boy. Even more alarming, he could not speak. Not a single word escaped his lips until after his 4th birthday. His tongue had already begun to enlarge unnaturally, filling his mouth and spilling over his teeth. His lower jaw jutted outward, creating the infamous Habsburg jaw, a deformity so pronounced that artists could only minimize it in portraits, never erase it. When Charles finally spoke, his words were wet and slurred, almost incomprehensible. Court chroniclers delicately recorded that His Majesty's speech required interpretation. What they meant was that saliva poured constantly from his mouth as he tried to form words, and attendants had to stand ready with silk cloths to wipe the chin of the child who would be king. Foreign ambassadors, upon meeting the young prince, often struggled to maintain composure. One French diplomat wrote privately that the boy's face seemed doubled, as if he wore another jaw stacked in front of his real one. When he attempted to eat, food slipped out of his mouth and fell onto his lap. When he spoke, it was necessary to stand back to avoid the spray of saliva. Meals in the Spanish court became humiliating spectacles. Every dish had to be altered, meats cut into tiny pieces, vegetables boiled into paste, bread soaked in wine until it dissolved. Charles swallowed his food whole, like a pelican, because his teeth never met. An English ambassador described it in stark detail. His Catholic Majesty swallows all he eats whole, for his nether jaw stands so much out that his 2 rows of teeth cannot meet. To compensate, he has a prodigious stomach and swallows a whole lamb at 2 meals. But Charles's struggles were not only physical, they were symbolic. In the 17th century, a royal child was meant to embody strength and continuity. Across Europe, young princes were paraded before their people as proof of dynastic vitality. In France, Louis XIV, as a boy, was already a miniature king, dancing in ballets and dazzling courtiers with his precocious charm. In England, royal heirs were drilled in languages and swordplay before they could even write their names. Charles, by contrast, was hidden. There were no triumphant parades, no displays of vigor. Instead, there were whispers in corridors, prayers before icons, and rumors that Spain's heir was bewitched. To a deeply Catholic society, the idea of a cursed or monstrous child was not science but theology. His frailty was read as a sign of God's displeasure, a punishment for sins unspoken, and in many ways, the boy himself became a mirror of the empire. Spain, once the strongest power in Europe, was already beginning to decline, its wars draining the treasury, its silver fleets no longer as rich, its people weary. The broken child in Madrid symbolized a dynasty, and perhaps a nation, cracking under the weight of its past glories. As Charles grew, or rather failed to grow, his image became a problem no portrait could conceal. The boy was an heir not of strength, but of weakness, a child who could not run, could not speak clearly, could not even close his mouth. The dynasty had preserved its bloodline, yes, but at a terrible cost. The court whispered, the people wondered, and the Habsburg name, once synonymous with invincibility, began to be associated with frailty. For the first time, Spain's enemies looked to Madrid and saw not a fortress, but a fragile child carried in the arms of servants. As the years passed, it became painfully clear that Charles would never outgrow his frailties. Instead, his body seemed determined to betray him at every stage of development. Childhood illnesses, common in the 17th century, struck him with unusual cruelty. Measles nearly killed him at the age of 6. Chickenpox came next, leaving him covered in scars. Then rubella, then smallpox. Each disease found in him a willing host, his weakened body offering little resistance. The smallpox was particularly merciless. At 9 years old, Charles hovered for weeks between life and death. When he finally pulled through, his face bore new scars, adding to the catalogue of disfigurements that already marked him. But worse than the scars was what came after. Physicians noticed swelling in his head. His skull, already grotesquely large, began to expand further. The pressure caused blinding headaches, blurred vision, and fainting spells. Today we would call it hydrocephalus, water on the brain. In the 17th century, it was seen as yet another curse upon the prince. His body was not simply weak, it was unraveling from the inside out. Education became a scandal, whispered throughout the palace. Tutors among the most respected scholars in Spain despaired. Lessons had to be repeated dozens of times, and even then, Charles retained almost nothing. Arithmetic baffled him. Latin, the language of diplomacy, was incomprehensible. His handwriting, when he attempted it, looked like the scrawls of a much younger child. One tutor's private notes, discovered centuries later, paint a heartbreaking portrait. His Majesty tries with great effort, but retains nothing. I explain a concept, and by the next day it is as if he has never heard it. His attention wanders. Sometimes he stares at nothing for long periods. When asked what he is thinking, he cannot say. Imagine the frustration of those tasked with educating him. For the Spanish court, the heir was not just a boy. He was a symbol of empire, the embodiment of Spain's claim to power. Every prince of Europe was expected to master languages, theology, and statecraft. The young Louis XIV of France dazzled courtiers with his intellect and poise. Across the Channel, English princes were drilled in swordsmanship and governance. Charles, by comparison, could barely grasp the simplest of lessons. The court compensated with ritual. He was dressed in rich silks, seated on miniature thrones, paraded at ceremonies as though mere presence could substitute for competence. In this way, the boy was transformed into a living relic, an icon of monarchy rather than a functioning child. But behind the embroidered doublets and golden chains was a mind clouded by fog, struggling to catch hold of thought. And then came the years when his body should have begun to change, to step from boyhood into manhood. Except for Charles, puberty never arrived. While his contemporaries grew taller, broader, more confident, Charles remained stunted. His voice never deepened. It stayed thin and high. His body hair was barely visible. He seemed suspended in a strange limbo, neither child nor man. The physicians held hushed consultations. They dared not write openly what they saw, but they knew. The prince would never become the kind of man who could continue the dynasty. His body was not just weak, it was incapable of maturity. This terrified the court, because for all his titles, for all the pomp and ceremony, Charles had one duty above all others, to produce an heir. The vast Spanish Empire, stretching across Europe, the Americas, and the Philippines, depended on his ability to father children. Without that, the dynasty would collapse, and with it, Spain's hold on power. But how could a boy who could not grow a beard, who shuffled weakly down corridors supported by attendants, be expected to carry the weight of empire on his shoulders? Whispers of witchcraft grew louder. To many Spaniards, Charles's condition could not be explained by medicine. They believed he had been cursed, that demons gnawed at his body, that envious powers had bewitched their king-to-be. His nickname, El Hechizado, the Bewitched, took root even before he sat upon the throne. And in a way, those whispers carried a truth. He was cursed, not by witches, but by the decisions of his ancestors, by centuries of marriages that tied the Habsburg bloodline into knots, by an empire more concerned with preserving power than preserving life. The boy who could not learn, could not grow, could not thrive, became a symbol of Spain itself, once magnificent, now fragile, collapsing under the weight of its own history. At 18, Charles faced the greatest test of his life. Not a battle, not governance, but the wedding bed. The entire weight of empire pressed upon his frail shoulders. His one duty was to secure an heir. In 1679, Charles married Marie-Louise of Orléans, the beautiful niece of King Louis XIV of France. She was 17, radiant, and described by courtiers as charming and intelligent. The contrast with her new husband was brutal. She glided down the aisle like sunlight. He shuffled, pallid, supported by attendants. At the wedding feast, guests whispered that the bride looked like a queen from a painting, while the groom resembled a wax figure half melted by heat. When the moment for the ceremonial kiss arrived, observers noticed Marie-Louise visibly steeling herself before leaning toward her husband's protruding jaw and drooling mouth. The wedding night was a disaster. Not the kind that couples laugh about later, but one that determined the fate of nations. Charles was incapable of consummation, not unwilling, but physically unable. His body simply did not respond. What was whispered in bedchambers became known in every court of Europe. The King of Spain was impotent. Marie-Louise, raised in the refined French court, tried everything. She was patient, gentle, even inventive, but nothing worked. Years passed without pregnancy. Physicians examined her repeatedly, humiliatingly, and declared her perfectly fertile. The problem was the king himself, though no one dared record it in official documents. The pressure was crushing. Spain's empire stretched across continents, but without an heir, it was a sandcastle against the tide. Desperate physicians turned to quack remedies. Charles was made to drink concoctions of herbs, pearls ground to dust, and even bull's blood. At one point, he was prescribed the dried penis of a stag, powdered and mixed with wine. Nothing changed. The queen, too, was forced to endure humiliations, swallowing bitter potions of animal organs, enduring endless examinations. But as years passed, her womb remained empty. Court gossip turned cruel, speculating that perhaps God himself had closed her body as punishment. When medicine failed, superstition took over. Charles's mother, Queen Mariana, obsessed with producing a grandchild, turned to mystics and priests. One declared that Charles was cursed, and the curse could be lifted if he slept beside holy relics. The young king obediently lay beside reliquaries containing fragments of saints. When that failed, Mariana escalated. Charles was made to spend nights beside corpses, exhumed bodies of saints, and even his own father. Picture it, the King of Spain, drooling and deformed, lying beside decaying cadavers in a desperate hope that death might spark life. This was not medieval folklore. It happened in the gilded palaces of 17th century Madrid. 10 years passed. 10 years of failure, of rumors, of humiliation. In 1689, Marie-Louise died suddenly at the age of 26. The official cause was appendicitis, but whispers spread like wildfire. Had she been poisoned by enemies at court? Or had despair driven her to take her own life? We may never know. What is certain is that Charles was devastated. Despite everything, despite the humiliation and the failure, he had loved her. She had shown him kindness when few others had. But Spain had no time for grief. Within months, the king was forced into a second marriage. His new bride was Maria Anna of Neuburg, a German princess from a famously fertile family. Her parents had produced 17 children. Surely, the council reasoned, such powerful genes could overcome Charles's deficiencies. But the pattern repeated. Maria Anna never conceived, not once. By then, Charles's body was deteriorating even further. He shuffled through palace corridors, his hair falling out in clumps, his teeth rotting away, his speech more slurred than ever. He suffered seizures, collapsing suddenly with foam spilling from his mouth, his limbs jerking violently as horrified courtiers looked on. When he recovered, he sometimes failed to recognize the faces around him. The king began to speak of visions. He claimed to see ghosts, to hear voices whispering in the darkness. He felt invisible hands touching him. The court, already steeped in superstition, concluded he was bewitched. The nickname El Hechizado, the Bewitched, became more than a whisper. It was his identity. The Spanish Inquisition itself was drawn into the crisis. Exorcists were summoned to rid the king of demons. His own confessor was accused of witchcraft and arrested. Holy water was sprinkled, relics pressed to his skin, prayers chanted over his trembling body. But no prayer could cure what centuries of inbreeding had written into his very cells. Even Charles believed it. In rare moments of lucidity, he would break down in tears and ask what sins he had committed to deserve such torment. He wore amulets, carried relics, submitted to endless rituals. Nothing helped. His body was a battlefield, every organ collapsing, every bone failing. Spain itself seemed to mirror its king. Once the strongest empire in the world, now weakened, divided, haunted by debts and wars it could no longer win. The court, once glittering with ceremony, now buzzed with rumors of curses and witches. And at the center of it all stood Charles, a king who could not rule, a man who could not father a child, a monarch whose body was a grotesque metaphor for the empire he embodied. By his mid-30s, Charles no longer resembled a king. He resembled a ghost wandering his own palace. His hair fell out in ragged patches, his teeth rotted one by one, his skin sagged loosely over a skeletal frame. He shuffled when he walked, pausing every few steps to rest, drool running constantly down his chin. The seizures came without warning. At banquets, at prayers, even in private audiences, the King of Spain would collapse, his body convulsing violently. Courtiers stood helpless as foam mingled with saliva and poured from his mouth. When he recovered, his mind often seemed absent, his words drifting into rambling tales of angels, demons, and dead relatives. By then, the whispers had turned into open conviction. Charles was cursed. He himself believed it. He wept in his confessor's arms, begging to know why God punished him. The Inquisition launched investigations. Exorcists stormed the palace. Priests laid hands on the king. Yet nothing changed, because the true curse was not sorcery, it was blood. By the age of 35, Charles looked decades older. Contemporary descriptions are difficult to read. His scalp covered in sores, his jaw jutting grotesquely, his body so frail he could barely lift a goblet. His speech, always slurred, had become almost incomprehensible. In his final months, he could no longer eat even the softened foods prepared specially for him. His distended skull throbbed with unbearable headaches, the water pressing against his brain. He wasted away in his bed, gasping for breath, his eyes staring blankly into the shadows of his chamber. On November 1st, 1700, after days of agony, Charles II died at just 38 years old. The king who had been mocked as the Bewitched exhaled his last breath. The Spanish court descended into mourning, but what came next horrified even the men who had treated him for years. The autopsy. The royal physicians cut open the body of their king and recoiled in disbelief. Their report, written in the cold language of Latin, read like something from a nightmare. They wrote that his body contained not a single drop of blood. His circulatory system had essentially collapsed. His blood had clotted or disappeared entirely. His heart was shriveled, blackened, and scarcely recognizable as the organ of life. His lungs were corroded, scarred from repeated infections resembling pumice stone more than tissue. His intestines were rotten and gangrenous, parts of his digestive system having literally decayed while he still lived. And then came the detail that confirmed what generations of courtiers had whispered. Charles had only one testicle, shriveled and black as coal. His reproductive system had been as dead as the rest of his body, ensuring that the dynasty would die with him. Finally, they opened his skull. What they found explained everything. His head was filled with water. His brain was so compressed by hydrocephalus that it was astonishing he had managed to function at all. How Charles had spoken, thought, or even lived to 38 was a medical mystery. The physicians must have stood there, drenched in the gore of their dissection, marveling at the grotesque miracle of endurance. For nearly 4 decades, this ruined body had been propped upon a throne, wearing crowns and robes, issuing decrees, and representing an empire. Modern science has given us the answers that 17th century physicians could not. Geneticists have studied the Habsburg line and concluded that Charles suffered from at least two major disorders. The first was combined pituitary hormone deficiency, which crippled his growth, his fertility, and his mental development. The second was distal renal tubular acidosis, which warped his bones, weakened his muscles, and may have worsened the swelling of his skull. Either condition alone could have ruined a life. Together, compounded by centuries of inbreeding, they created a cascade of failures that destroyed a king. His inbreeding coefficient, 0.254, was higher than the child of direct siblings. In his very genes, destruction was written. Charles was not uniquely unlucky. He was inevitable. Of the 34 children born to Spanish Habsburg monarchs, more than half died before the age of 10. The dynasty was breeding itself to death. Charles was simply the last, most grotesque chapter. And with his death, the Spanish Habsburg line ended. No assassin, no revolution, just a body too broken to produce an heir. His death triggered the War of Spanish Succession, a conflict that tore Europe apart and reshaped its balance of power. The Bourbon dynasty replaced the Habsburgs, and though politics still arranged marriages, the extreme inbreeding that created Charles II was never repeated. Today, Charles II remains in medical textbooks as the ultimate warning of genetic collapse. His portrait, hanging in Madrid's Prado Museum, still unsettles viewers. Even court painters, tasked with flattery, could not disguise his deformities. Visitors stop before it, staring into the slack jaw, the heavy eyes, the strange, tragic figure of a man trapped by his bloodline. Behind the crown, behind the titles, there was only a human being, a boy carried in the arms of servants, a man mocked as cursed, a king who spent his life in pain and humiliation. In his final letter, dictated because he could no longer hold a pen, Charles asked only for peace in death, the peace he had never known in life. And in that, perhaps, he was granted mercy. The dynasty that had once ruled half the world ended not in triumph or glory, but in the quiet of a death chamber, in the hollow body of a man undone by his own ancestry. His story stands today as one of history's starkest warnings, that even the mightiest empires cannot escape biology. The next time you look at a royal portrait, remember Charles II. Remember that beneath the gilded robes and solemn faces, the human body tells its own story. And sometimes, that story is a tragedy beyond imagination,